Hello, my people. Welcome to African Tales by Ify. Grab a drink and let's spend some time together. Tonight, we're opening a chapter from a story many of us might recognize in our own communities, the delicate dance of family. Our tale centers on a man whose heart was true, but whose voice often faltered when it came to his mother and sister. We'll explore the quiet struggles he faced and the impact it had on the woman he loved. Join me as we delve into this poignant African narrative titled Erica. The wife they couldn't break, Erica, had always been the kind of woman whose presence could calm a storm. Quiet, respectful, and thoughtful, she married Somto not because he was rich, but because she saw potential in him. Her joy was not loud, but it was full, and her prayers for him were unrelenting. From the moment she entered the family, Somto's mother, Mama Somto, and his younger sister, Adiz, made it clear she wasn't welcome. They whispered when she entered rooms, rearranged meals she prepared, and mocked her silence as weakness. Yet Erica remained calm, cooking for them, praying for them, hoping time would win their hearts. Somto stood in the middle. He loved his wife but feared his family. He promised Erica things would get better, but Erica noticed that Somto rarely corrected his mother or sister. Instead, he would ask her to just manage it for now, and manage it she did with grace she never got credit for. Within a year of their marriage, Somto's business took a remarkable turn. Contracts came effortlessly, doors opened without struggle, and opportunities flowed like a river after rainfall. Even he knew it wasn't normal. What Somto didn't see, but his friends did, was how Erica quietly fasted every week for his success. She would wake up at 3 a.m., kneel beside him, and whisper prayers over his sleeping form. Her words weren't loud, but the heavens heard. Mama Somto saw the change too, but she credited it to her son's hard work. Since Somto was small, I knew he would be great. Now see how far he's gone, she would say, never once acknowledging Erica's contributions. Adaze, bitter and unmarried, claimed Erica was using juju. The peace in the house was only on the surface. Underneath, fire simmered. The attacks on Erica became subtle and cruel. Her food would be thrown away, her clothes taken from the line and tossed into the mud. Adaze even spread rumors about her in the neighborhood, that Erica had bewitched Somto. Still, Erica said nothing. She didn't run to her family. She didn't scream. She endured, believing that love required sacrifice. But every night she cried into her pillow, her tears soaking what faith she had left. Somto saw the tension but remained silent. "Don't mind them," he would say. "You know how Mama is. You know Adaze doesn't have sense." Erica wanted him to do something, not just explain things away. But Somto was a son before he was a husband, and that choice was costing them. Erica began to sense that no matter how hard she tried, her kindness would never be enough. Mama Somto and Adaze found fault in everything, her cooking, her dress, even her prayers. "You pray too quietly," Mama Somto once hissed. "Are you hiding something?" At night, Somto would pull her close and promise things would change. "Just give them time," he said, kissing her forehead. "You're the best thing that ever happened to me." But his voice lacked conviction. Erica could hear the fear he still had of offending his mother. Erica held her peace, not because she was weak, but because she had seen women destroy their homes with retaliation. Her mother always said, "Silence is not defeat. It's strategy." She prayed more, smiled more, and started keeping a journal of her pain. As Somto's business bloomed, people began to notice. Friends he hadn't spoken to in years called to ask for partnerships. His name began to circulate in bigger circles. But even with this success, he remained blind to the roots of his favor. Erica's prayers became more intense. Every Wednesday she fasted for him. Every midnight, she whispered his name to God. She did not ask for riches. She asked for wisdom, for protection, and for a heart that would love her louder. But at home, she was treated like a guest, overstaying her welcome. One afternoon, Mama Somto said, "Do you think your prayers are the reason my son is successful?" "God answers my prayers, not yours." Erica said nothing. But in her journal she wrote, "Lord, vindicate me gently." Erica became a shadow in her own home. She timed her movements to avoid the women who despised her. Adais once locked her outside when she went to buy groceries. When Somto came home and heard about it, he laughed and said, "You know Adais is just childish." That night, Erica didn't speak. She served his food, cleared the dishes, and went to bed early. Somto thought she was sulking. He didn't know that something inside her had shifted. The hope that things would change had started to die. She began to save, quietly. Every bit of thank you money from neighbors whose children she helped, every little extra she could find, she kept. Not to run away, but to have a cushion, if things went too far. Somto loved his wife, but he was still his mother's son. He believed that ignoring conflict was the same as resolving it. He avoided confrontations, hoping they would vanish with time. But fire unattended only spreads. He began to spend more time at the office. Business was booming, and he used it as an excuse to avoid the tension at home. When Erica once asked him to speak to his mother about a particularly harsh insult, he sighed and said, "Just ignore her. You're bigger than this." But Erica was tired of being bigger. She didn't want to win battles, she wanted peace. And every time Somto refused to defend her, the foundation of their marriage weakened, even if the roof still looked beautiful from the outside. Mama Somto declared that Erica was bringing a curse into the house. She claimed that since Erica entered, her own dreams had become troubling. Adais added fuel, saying she saw Erica talking to herself at night. Erica had been praying. Somto rolled his eyes when they told him, "So now my wife is a witch." But he didn't scold them. He didn't ask them to stop. He just changed the subject. And when Erica asked him why he never spoke up, he replied, "I just don't want to escalate things." That night, Erica packed her prayer journal into a small bag. She looked around the house that never felt like hers and wept, not because she had failed, but because she had given so much and still wasn't enough. It happened on a Sunday. Erica had prepared rice and stew before church. By the time she returned, the food was gone. Mama Somto said she had thrown it out. "You will not poison me in my own house," she spat. Somto stood and watched as Erica knelt before his mother, pleading, not out of guilt, but desperation. He didn't say a word. When Erica turned to him, expecting him to correct the injustice, all he said was, "Erica, maybe just let it go." She stood up slowly, wiped her eyes. That night, she didn't sleep beside him. She slept on the couch, and in her heart, she wrote the first goodbye letter he never read. Shortly after that incident, one afternoon, after Erica returned from the market, she found her clothes scattered across the compound. Adais had slashed her shoes. Mama Somto accused her of bringing bad spirits into the home and spat in her direction. Somto, instead of defending Erica, asked her, "Did you do anything to provoke them?" That broke her. She stared at him, heartbroken, silent. That night she packed a single bag and walked out, not to her parents' home, but to a friend's house. She left her wedding ring on the table. Somto didn't chase after her. He told himself it was temporary, that she would come back, that he needed time to manage the situation. But the house felt colder without her. Somto didn't expect Erica to actually leave. He assumed she'd return after a few days. But she didn't. Instead, she sent a message through a friend. "I'm safe. I need peace. Please don't come unless you're ready to choose me." His mother called a meeting and declared good riddance. Adais laughed, but Somto wasn't laughing. The house felt strange. Food didn't taste right. His sleep was restless. He started forgetting meetings. Business was still running, but cracks began to show. One by one, contracts slipped. Clients stopped returning calls. Employees began complaining, but Somto brushed it off as a rough patch. He didn't know a storm was forming. Days passed into weeks and weeks into months, and his phone was no longer ringing with new business, so did the income too. Everything started going south. When his accountant warned him about declining cash flow, Somto snapped. "Just do your job," he yelled. His staff started walking on eggshells. The charm that once drew people to him was gone. So was the favor that once followed him. He hired consultants, marketing teams, and even changed office locations. Nothing worked. He began working longer hours, convinced he could rebuild by force. But no matter how hard he tried, something unseen pushed back. He remembered Erica's prayers, the soft whispers at night, the warm meals, the peace. He missed her. But he still hadn't admitted out loud that she was the reason his world had flourished. One day, he returned to the room they once shared, found a journal she had left behind. Flipping through it, he found prayers dated back to when they were still courting. "Lord, let him prosper," one entry read. "Let me never be a burden." Sumter sat on the edge of the bed and wept for the first time in years. But even his tears couldn't bring back what he'd lost. His mother watched him fall apart but still blamed Erica. "She cursed you when she left," Mama Sumter said. "Let's take you to a prophet." But Sumter didn't want a prophet. He wanted his wife, and he was starting to realize how much he had betrayed her by saying nothing at all. Sumter's once bustling office now echoed with silence. Desks were cleared and staff left in droves. He kept making calls, but it was as though the air around him had shifted. Nothing stuck, nothing moved forward. Even his business partners pulled away without explanation. At home, his mother continued as if nothing had happened. She still blamed witches, enemies, and the economy. Adais, who once bragged about his success, had moved to another city, claiming she needed a change. But Sumter was finally seeing clearly. The peace left when Erica did. For the first time, he said her name in prayer. Not to accuse her, not to ask her to return, but to ask for forgiveness. Something inside him broke wide open. He wept on his office floor, not as a CEO, but as a man who had failed the one person who truly carried him. Weeks upon weeks, clients stopped responding. Contracts were lost. A major deal collapsed. Staff began resigning. The bank called. His accounts were in the red. For the first time since he started, Sumter couldn't pay salaries. Still, he said nothing. Pride kept his mouth shut. When friends asked about Erica, he lied. "She's visiting her people," he'd say. Deep down, he felt something had shifted in the atmosphere. His sleep was troubled. Nothing was working. Mama Sumter told him to remarry. Adais suggested he do cleansing. They brought in prophets. None of them could explain what was happening. It wasn't until he met one strange old prophet at a church vigil that the truth came out. One night, Sumter attended a late-night vigil, not out of faith but desperation. There, an old prophet walked up to him uninvited. "You," he said, "you drove your favor out of your house and covered it with silence." Sumter froze. The man didn't know him, hadn't asked questions, but every word landed like thunder. "The woman you allowed to be mocked was your covering. Until you restore her, you will continue to lose more than money. You'll lose your destiny." The words haunted him. He couldn't sleep. He tried calling Erica but got no answer. Still, he didn't stop. Each day he sent messages, some apologizing, others explaining. But Erica remained silent. She was waiting not for words, but for evidence of change. Sumter's conscience burned. He remembered every moment he chose silence over justice, comfort over courage. He had allowed his mother and sister to shape his marriage with bitterness, and now he was left with echoes. He began to withdraw from everyone. He stopped taking advice from his mother. He sold his cars to pay off debts and returned to simpler routines. The pride that once kept him from seeing the truth had shattered. He didn't just want Erica back. He wanted to become the kind of man she could return to. Not a man who feared conflict, but one who protected what mattered. He started therapy, started praying, started healing. Erica, meanwhile, was thriving, not in luxury but in peace. She taught at a local school and joined a small fellowship. Her prayers were lighter now. She laughed more. But every now and then, Sumter would appear in her dreams, hurting, lost. She missed him, but she had also found herself again. The girl who once whispered to avoid offending others now spoke with purpose. She didn't want revenge. She wanted restoration with boundaries. When she received Somto's first apology message, she read it twice, then deleted it. Not because she hated him, but because she needed more than words. She needed proof that the boy she married had become a man. Things began to shift at home. Mama Somto, once proud and domineering, fell ill unexpectedly. Doctors found nothing specific, but her health declined. Adays didn't return, nor did she call. Somto took care of her, but without the blind reverence of before. One day she whispered, "Your wife." She brought light. I only saw it when it left. She cried not just from sickness, but from regret. It was the first time she called Erica "your wife" instead of "that girl." Somto didn't respond. He simply wiped her tears and silently wished he had stood up earlier. But time wasn't theirs to reverse, it was only theirs to learn from. Erica stood outside the compound one morning, unannounced. Not with bags, not with anger, but with a flask of soup and a note. She handed it to the gatekeeper, turned, and left before anyone could say a word. The note read, "Healing starts with humility. I hope you're well." It was the first contact in over 9 months. Somto read it a dozen times. He didn't call. Instead, he went to the kitchen and warmed the soup himself. That evening, he sat at the table and ate alone. But this time he cried not from sorrow, but from gratitude. She hadn't returned, but she had forgiven, and that was more than he deserved. Somto began again on his own. He rented a modest apartment near the school where Erica taught. Not to stalk her, but to remind himself of what mattered. He volunteered at local outreaches, started mentoring young men, and slowly rebuilt. One day he found her teaching. He didn't interrupt. He stood at a distance, watched, and quietly walked away. She saw him. She smiled. He was no longer the man waiting for her to fix everything. He was fixing himself finally. Erica agreed to meet him for coffee. It was polite, almost awkward. She asked hard questions. "Would you defend me now, even if your mother disapproved?" He didn't answer with promises. He answered with stories of actions he had taken. He told her about his mother's apology, about the collapse, about the prophet. "You were my covering," he said. "I let them strip it away. I let myself lose you in my silence." Erica listened quietly. "Somto, I love you. But love without protection is punishment. If I return, it must be different." He nodded. He had no other answer but change. She gave him conditions, counseling, financial boundaries from his family, a separate home, monthly check-ins. He agreed, not because he was desperate, but because he knew she was right. He brought in a counselor, invited her to family sessions. Mama Somto, now bedridden, listened without protest. She even whispered once, "Tell Erica I am sorry." For everything, Erica didn't rush. She watched, she prayed, and when she finally smiled at him again, it wasn't from pity, it was from peace. Erica returned not with luggage, but with presence. She came home to a new apartment. A new Somto, a new season. There was no ceremony, no family crowd. Just the two of them on a sofa, laughing over burnt stew. Somto didn't beg, he served, he listened. He unlearned, and Erica, seeing the change, let herself love again, not the man she married, but the man he had become. Their prayers resumed, together this time. Not just for business, but for wisdom, health, and for the quiet love that grows roots instead of noise. Erica returned to her home, not with the loudness of triumph, but with the quiet confidence of someone who had survived fire and now knew how to rebuild. The apartment Somto found was modest but peaceful. There were no shrines to success, no over-polished displays of wealth, just space for healing and honesty. Each morning, they sat on the balcony sipping tea, not rushing into conversations, but letting silence stretch gently between them. Somto had learned the value of listening. When Erica spoke, he no longer waited to reply, he received. It was a small but profound shift. She noticed the wounds hadn't vanished overnight. Sometimes Erica would flinch at raised voices, and sometimes Somto would look at her with the aching guilt of memory. But their healing was mutual. They learned to hold space for one another's fears. Erica still prayed, but now she did it with her hand in his, and Somto finally prayed back. Somto didn't chase his old clients. He started over from the bottom, reaching out to small business owners and offering his services with humility. Word spread, not about how rich he once was, but about how grounded he had become. That authenticity began to open new doors. Erica supported him, but on her own terms. She volunteered at a nearby girls' foundation, teaching quiet strength and resilience to women like her, those who had been silenced or displaced. Her story wasn't one of victimhood. It was one of transformation. Girls began to flock to her with journals, tears, and questions. One afternoon, Somto walked in to find Erica speaking to a group of women about boundaries in marriage. She didn't know he was listening. He wept in silence, not from shame but pride. She had rebuilt herself into more than a wife. She had become a voice, and somehow she still chose him. One day, Adaze returned unexpectedly, looking thinner, tired, and without the edge she once carried. Her job had collapsed, and a failed relationship had left her stranded. Mama Somto, now bedridden, whispered weakly, "Let her stay. She has no one." Erica said nothing for a long moment. Then she nodded. "She can stay. But there are rules now." The house was no longer the battlefield it used to be. Erica set clear boundaries. No shouting, no insults, no meddling. This was her home now, not a war zone. Adaze didn't argue. In fact, she began to soften. Watching Erica cook, lad, and move in quiet confidence changed something in her. "You're stronger than I thought," she said one evening. "I always thought silence meant weakness. I was wrong." Erica didn't reply. Some truths don't need response. One morning, a relative visited, an uncle known for speaking out of turn. Over lunch, he made a snide comment, "So Somto, you really let a woman run your house now?" The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Somto. In the past, he would have laughed nervously or brushed it aside. But this time he stood up slowly and said, "I don't let her. I choose her, because when I didn't, I lost everything." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't boast. And in that moment, Erica felt safer than she ever had before. The uncle muttered something and changed the subject, but Adaye smiled quietly into her food. Mama Somto, watching from her corner of the room, wiped a tear and whispered, "Finally, a man has become a husband." Some weeks later, Erica found out she was pregnant. The test lay quietly on the bathroom sink. She stared at it, a million thoughts running through her. It wasn't fear, it wasn't even a shock. It was something deeper, hope, wrapped in healing. She walked out, handed Somto the test, and watched his face shift from confusion to awe. He dropped to his knees, holding her hands, whispering prayers between breaths. "I don't deserve this," he said. Erica replied, "Neither of us does. But grace isn't earned, it's planted." The child's on a fix, it wasn't a trophy. It was a new beginning. And this time they would build a home where voices were heard, hearts were honored, and favor was never taken for granted again. Their life became slower but richer. Mornings were filled with prayer and laughter. Evenings with reading aloud and long walks. Somto's new business model focused on service, not scale. He began mentoring young men, just like Erica mentored women. Mama Somto passed away peacefully not long after, with Erica holding her hand. "I wronged you," she said softly, "but you showed me who a real woman is." Erica kissed her forehead and whispered, "Rest now." Even death couldn't steal the peace they had fought to build. And on the day they told the church about the coming baby, Erica stood not as a woman who had suffered, but one who had survived, healed, forgiven, and risen. She held Somto's hand as he wept in gratitude, surrounded by the very community that once questioned her worth. One night, while praying together, Somto broke down. "I now understand what it means to lead with love, not control." Erica smiled and wiped his tears. "You don't have to be perfect, just present." The next day, Somto got a call. An international contract he'd forgotten about months ago had been revived. Things were beginning to rise again, but he no longer cared about the peak. only the peace. Because now he understood. The true wealth wasn't in the business. It was in the woman who brought favor and stayed even after silence tried to bury her. The morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned. Sunlight streamed through the curtains of their small but peaceful home. Erica stood by the kitchen window, her hand resting gently on her now showing belly. The kettle hissed beside her. Outside, children laughed. Inside, her heart was full. Somto sat at the dining table, flipping through her old prayer journal, the one he had once overlooked, now dog-eared and sacred. "You wrote every day," he whispered. "Even when I didn't say thank you. Even when I was too blind to see you." Erica walked over and sat beside him. "You see me now," she said softly. "That's what matters." They held hands in silence, not because there was nothing to say, but because there was nothing left to prove. Later that afternoon, a neighbor knocked. Her teenage daughter had run away. Without hesitation, Erica grabbed her slippers and followed the woman. Somto watched her leave and smiled. She had become a pillar, not just in his life, but in their community. She had entered his world quietly, was nearly driven out, but returned with wisdom, peace, and power. And this time he protected the gift he once failed to honor. Because some favor comes as rain, but Erica came as a seed, quiet, buried, fought, and finally blossomed. Thank you so much for listening and watching. This brings us to the end of Somto's challenging journey. His story, like many we hear, holds a mirror to our own experiences, reminding us of the delicate balance between tradition, family loyalty, and personal happiness. What did you take away from Somto's struggles? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Until we gather again for another story under the African sky, take care and look out for one another. What's up, family? Ready for some fire? You just landed on the best spot for captivating African stories on African Tales by Afi. You found your home, right here where the magic of African stories unfolds. From sun-kissed plains to starlit nights, we're bringing you tales of heroes, wisdom, and wonder that pulse with the rhythm of our African heritage. Settle in, lean closer. Turn up the volume, share the vibe. Let the stories begin as we make some history with every tale. Let's go. Today's story is titled Blood Ties, Bitter Ends. A story set in a home divided by favoritism. Two brothers became enemies. Blood Ties, Bitter Ends unravels the gripping saga of Akpan and Udo, whose sibling rivalry spiraled into public tragedy and a legacy of regret. Some stories demand to be told even when the truth hurts the most. In the bustling city of Uyo, two brothers were born into the wealthy Sir and Lady Akpabio family. The firstborn, Akpan, was strong, intelligent, and favored by their father, Chief Uwem Akpabio, a successful businessman known for his discipline and high expectations. The younger brother, Udo, was more artistic and emotionally intuitive, adored fiercely by their mother, Lady Akpabio, who believed sensitivity was a gift, not a flaw. From a young age, each parent's favoritism began to sow quiet resentment in the hearts of the boys. At birthday celebrations, Akpan received expensive toys and public praise from their father, while Udo was often relegated to the background, his efforts unnoticed unless acknowledged by their mother. In turn, Lady Akpabio would secretly take Udo to art galleries, museums, and retreats, often excluding Akpan, whom she labeled as too stiff or too harsh. The boys quickly learned which parent was their champion, and which sibling stood in the way of their love. Family dinners were tense. Praise for one son often came at the expense of the other. "Why can't you be more like Akpan?" Chief Akpabio would bark at Udo. "You'll never understand true leadership." Meanwhile, Lady Akpabio would retort, "At least Udo has a heart. Not everyone wants to be a cold statue like your precious Akpan." Their once whole family began to fracture, one pointed comment at a time. As the brothers grew into teenagers, the rivalry intensified. Akpan thrived academically and became the head boy of his prestigious secondary school. Udo, meanwhile, gained a reputation as a budding poet and performed at community events. But even their successes drove them further apart, each one a bitter reminder of the other's seemingly opposite world. They began to avoid each other in the hallways of their home. Their conversations turned to jabs and passive-aggressive insults. Lady Akpabio would often defend Udo, calling Akpan a bully, while Chief Akpabio dismissed Udo as a soft weakling. The parents, instead of bridging the rift, fanned the flames, validating each boy's narrative of injustice. One evening, during a family reunion, a public argument broke out when Akpan was given a family heirloom in front of everyone. Udo exploded in rage, throwing a drink and storming off while Lady Uyo scolded her husband in front of the guests. That night marked a permanent change. Akpan and Udo no longer saw each other as brothers. They saw enemies raised under the same roof. After secondary school, Akpan secured a scholarship to study engineering abroad, while Udo stayed back in Nigeria, pursuing creative writing at a local university. Their physical distance only deepened the emotional one. Without their direct confrontations, the brothers began to live separate lives, but the bitterness lingered in every family call, every missed birthday, and every refusal to attend the same event. Chief Akpabio often boasted about Akpan's accomplishments, sending updates to family members as though Udo didn't exist. In response, Lady Akpabio would post Udo's published poems online, tagging relatives and subtly jabbing at Akpan's absence. The war had evolved no longer between two boys, but between their versions of the truth, championed by their parents. Udo, despite his mother's support, grew to resent how little his father cared. Akpan, despite his father's praise, felt an emptiness he couldn't place, a hole where a brother's bond should have been. Both were winning in their own worlds, but losing something far more precious: family. Years passed and life continued. Akpan, now a respected engineer in Canada, announced his engagement to a fellow professional, a Nigerian woman raised abroad. Invitations went out, but not to Udo. When Lady Akpabio learned of the omission, she was furious and called Ekepan immediately. "You won't invite your own brother?" she asked. "He stopped being my brother a long time ago," Akpan replied coldly. Lady Akpabio insisted Udo attend, hoping it would force reconciliation. Udo reluctantly agreed, more out of respect for her than any real desire to see Akpan. The night of the wedding was elegant and polished, with a sea of well-dressed guests and media presence. When Udo arrived, eyes turned, whispers spread. His presence was not expected by Akpan or his father. During the toast, Udo stood and raised his glass. To the groom, he said, "May this marriage never suffer the plague of favoritism." The room fell into a stunned silence. Akpan's face darkened, and Chief Akpabio rose to hush Udo, but the damage had been done. The old wound was ripped open in front of strangers and family alike. Not long after the wedding, Chief Akpabio fell gravely ill. The once vibrant patriarch now lay in bed, surrounded by legal documents and regrets. Whispers of inheritance began to circulate among extended family. Chief Akpabio, proud and traditional, wished to leave the majority of his estate to Akpan, who had carried on the family name and business legacy. Lady Akpabio, furious, demanded equity. "You may leave him your company, but not your soul." Udo is still your son. Tensions flared as lawyers got involved. Chief Akpabio refused to budge, insisting Udo lacked the discipline and ambition to manage anything substantial. Secretly, though, he drafted a small provision for Udo, enough for a house and a small grant. When Chief Akpabio eventually died, the will was read aloud. Akepan received the lion's share. Udo stood stiff and expressionless as the words confirmed what he had always known. He was never enough in his father's eyes. That night, he walked out of the house and didn't attend the funeral the next day. The Akpabio family broke again, this time over a pen and paper. Months after their father's burial, Udo published a best-selling novel titled Scars of the Living. The book, though fiction, mirrored his childhood so closely that anyone who knew the Akpabios could tell who was who. Akpan was painted as a cold-hearted villain, and Chief Akpabio as a tyrant who bred rivalry. Lady Akpabio was the gentle light, always fighting for love in a house ruled by pride. Akpan sued for defamation, citing damage to his reputation and brand. The case made headlines across Nigeria, pitting the brothers against each other once again. Social media was ablaze with opinions. Some saw Udo as a hero for daring to speak the truth. Others believed he crossed a line. Their mother, torn between grief and pride, begged both to stop. The court dismissed the lawsuit citing artistic freedom. But the verdict didn't matter. The brothers had now made enemies of each other on a national stage. Their feud had gone from private pain to public spectacle, with both reputations scarred, one by truth, the other by perception. Lady Akpabio, aging and heartbroken, tried everything to mend the shattered bond between her sons. She invited them for a private reconciliation dinner at her home. Udo agreed reluctantly, and Akpan showed up guarded and tense. For the first time in years, they sat at the same table without shouting. The meal began in awkward silence, broken only by the clinking of cutlery. Lady Akpabio served their favorite dishes, jollof rice for Akpan, fufu and afang soup for Udo, hoping nostalgia would do what words had failed to. As she watched them eat, tears welled in her eyes. "I failed you both," she whispered. "I let love become a weapon instead of a bridge." For a moment, Udo softened. He reached across the table, offering a glass of wine to Akpan. But before Akpan could respond, a notification buzzed on his phone, an alert about Udo's upcoming book tour with a segment titled Raised by Wolves. Akpan's jaw tightened. He stood up, threw his napkin on the plate, and walked out again. Peace once more slipped away. Months passed with no contact. Lady Akpabio's health began to decline, the emotional toll of a broken family manifesting in her body. Udo visited often, reading to her and holding her hand through long silences. Akpan sent money but stayed away, citing his busy schedule. Yet behind closed doors, he'd often stare at old family photos. His heart nodded with something like regret. One afternoon, Lady Akpabio whispered to Udo, "Tell him I forgive him, and I miss my boys." Udo promised, but he didn't believe Akpan would come. That evening, he sent a message, short, hesitant. Days passed with no reply. Then one quiet morning, Akpan appeared at the door. The brothers sat by their mother's bedside. She looked at them one last time, her voice fragile. "You are both parts of me," she said. "Don't let me die watching you destroy each other." Hours later, she passed peacefully, hands held by the sons she fought so hard to unite. But peace was still a far dream. Lady Akpabio's funeral was a modest emotional affair filled with whispers and unspoken tension. Udo delivered a heartfelt eulogy, painting a portrait of his mother as a woman of grace and strength. Akpan stood in the shadows, silent, his emotions buried deep behind a wall of pride and regret. They didn't ride in the same car, didn't speak to each other, and left at separate times. In the following weeks, Udo published one last piece, a short story titled The Brother I Never Had. It was raw and vulnerable, a reflection of what could have been. Akpan read it late one night, and for the first time he wept. But it wasn't enough to pick up the phone, wasn't enough to say the words. One rainy evening, Udo was struck by a vehicle on his way to a literary event. He died hours later in the hospital. Akpan arrived too late. He stood by the hospital bed, staring at his brother's lifeless body, overwhelmed by a storm of memories and remorse. The words he never said echoed loudly in the silence. Akpan returned to Canada, haunted by his brother's death. The silence that once gave him power now felt like a punishment. He kept Udo's book on his nightstand, thumbing through it on sleepless nights. Each line felt like a ghost, reminding him of laughter unshared, apologies unspoken, and a childhood too fractured to heal. He began to withdraw from friends and colleagues, drowning in guilt masked as work. Months passed, and he returned to Nigeria only once more to oversee the installation of a library in Udo's name. He spared no cost, ensuring it sat in the heart of the university Udo had attended. But even in this tribute, there was a hollowness. He avoided speaking to students, dodged reporters, and skipped the opening ceremony altogether. He stood outside that day, watching from afar, hiding the fact that he didn't feel like a hero, just a man trying too late to rewrite the past. Letters from extended family poured in, expressing admiration and sympathy, but Akpan felt none of it. His father's approval, his mother's forgiveness, and now his brother's life all gone. His wife, now distant, urged him to seek counseling. "You're not mourning him, Akpan," she said one night. "You're mourning yourself, the part of you he took with him." But Akpan said nothing because she was right. Time, they say, heals all wounds, but some wounds fester in silence. Akpan eventually retired early from engineering, settling into a quiet house outside Abuja. He took up gardening, journaling, and reading the very genre his brother once wrote in. Still, he avoided any interviews or public appearances, turning down awards and recognitions that referenced his late brother's legacy. One afternoon, he received a package, no return address, only his name handwritten across the box. Inside were copies of letters Udo had written but never sent. Some were drafts, some were complete. All were deeply personal. One stood out. It read, "If you ever read this, it means I'm gone. But I still hope you'll forgive yourself." Because I already did. Akpan clutched the paper to his chest and cried for the first time in public at the edge of his garden, where neighbors paused in confusion and sorrow. He began compiling a book, not about Udo, but about both of them. He titled it Blood Ties Bitter Ends. It was not a memoir nor a defense, but a reckoning. It held their story with brutal honesty, the favoritism, the fights, the failures, and the finality of regret. It was published quietly under initials. But those who read it knew. It was the story of two brothers who were never truly enemies, only wounded mirrors of each other. On the 5th anniversary of Udo's death, Akpan visited the family home in Uyo. The walls were faded, the air heavy with memories. He found himself wandering into the old dining room, the site of countless meals, arguments, and moments that might have changed everything if only someone had listened. He sat at the table, now dusty and cracked, and imagined Udo on the opposite side, laughing, judging, writing. A knock interrupted his thoughts. A young woman stood at the doorway. She introduced herself as Ika, a student who had been inspired by Udo's work and had just finished her own manuscript. "Your book changed my life," she said softly. Akpan smiled faintly. "It cost me mine," he replied, not bitterly, but as a man finally accepting his truth. He invited her in and made tea, just like Udo once would have done. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Akpan sat at the head of the table. One place setting remained untouched, Udo's. He left it there, not out of guilt, but reverence. Some dinners, he had learned, are never finished. Some words will never be spoken. But in honoring what was lost, perhaps the soul finds peace, even if it comes with a whisper, not a reunion. 1 year after publishing the memoir, Akpan agreed to a single interview with a young journalist from Lagos. She arrived with caution, aware of the sensitivity surrounding the story. "Why now?" she asked. Akpan paused, looking at the small frame of Udo's poem on his desk. "Because someone out there might still have time to change things." The interview aired on a popular YouTube TV channel. Akpan spoke calmly, openly for the first time in decades. He admitted to his mistakes, his father's favoritism, and his own silence. "I was complicit," he said, "but I'm done hiding behind legacy." The reaction was overwhelming. Families called in, students quoted his lines, and Udo's name trended again, not in scandal but in grace. Still, Akpan didn't seek fame. After the interview, he turned off his phone and returned to his quiet life. But something had shifted. He had opened the door not just for himself, but for countless others who grew up divided by love. Late one evening, Akpan walked through a local park and found himself near a children's poetry reading. He stayed in the shadows, listening. A boy stepped up and recited a poem titled "My Brother's Shoes." It mirrored his life so precisely that Akpan felt his knees weaken. He approached the boy's mother afterward and asked who helped him write it. She smiled. "Your brother's books. They're part of the school's curriculum now." Akpan wept silently as he left, a feeling of both pride and ache mingling in his chest. The legacy was real, but so was the loss. Udo's voice had finally reached the world. Yet the one person he wrote for was just now beginning to understand it. At home, Akpan framed the boy's poem and placed it beside Udo's letters. Every morning he read one line. Some days they brought tears, other days a reluctant smile. He had lost a brother, yes, but perhaps not forever. Not as long as the world remembered. Akpan's health began to fail in his 70s. Alone but not lonely, he remained at peace. In his final days, he asked to be buried not beside his parents, but beside Udo, in the village they both once hated and later learned to love. At his funeral, former students, readers, and family gathered. No extravagant tributes, just a reading of Scars of the Living and Blood Ties, Bitter Ends. The final speaker read a quote from Udo's unpublished letter. "We were not born to hurt each other. We were just born into a world that forgot to teach us how to love." As Akpan was laid to rest, a soft breeze passed through the trees. Some say it was just the wind. Others believed it was Udo, finally welcoming his brother home. In the end, they lay side by side, two lives shaped by pain, remembered in truth, and united at last in peace. Wow, what a ride. That's it for now, my people. Another story told, another truth unveiled. We hope this story stirred your soul and sparked your imagination. Thank you for being a part of our storytelling family. Your presence truly makes these tales shine brighter. Keep the fire burning, keep the conversations going, and always remember where we come from, as our legacy lives in the tales we share. So keep that rhythm alive, spread the word, and join us again for more magic. Until then, catch you on the next one for more African wonders. Lastly, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't, and share this journey with everyone you know. Together, we keep the heart of Africa beating through every single story. Until we meet again, go well. Peace. Hello, story lovers, and welcome to our channel, African Tales by Ify. Get ready to journey with us to the heart of Africa, where tales of love, loyalty, and destiny echo through time. Tonight, we unravel the captivating story of Hakim and Aisha. She was his anchor, his light, standing by him when shadows loomed largest and his pockets were empty. But what happens when the tides turn and the world suddenly takes notice of Hakim? Will their bond, forged in the fires of adversity, withstand the true test of prosperity? Get comfortable and turn up the volume. Share the good vibes as we kick off these stories and make history with every tale. Stay tuned, because this is a story you won't want to miss. Hit that subscribe button and let's dive into Hakim and Aisha, a love forged in fire. Hakim remembered the day he met Aisha as if it were yesterday, though years of hardship had blurred many other memories. He was a struggling university student, barely affording his tuition, let alone food. Hakim, a young man with a lean build, dark expressive eyes that hinted at a restless ambition, and skin the color of rich earth, often wore a determined frown. Aisha, a vibrant and compassionate young woman from a modest background, saw past his threadbare clothes and recognized the burning ambition in his eyes. Aisha, with her radiant smile, eyes that sparkled with resilience, and skin the warm hue of caramel, carried herself with a quiet grace despite their struggles. She shared her meager meals with him, tutored him in subjects he found difficult, and became his unwavering pillar of support, a quiet strength that anchored him through the turbulent waters of his youth. Their love blossomed amidst the scarcity, a testament to a bond forged in shared dreams and mutual respect, promising a future where their combined efforts would surely lead to prosperity. After university, Hakim's grand plans for immediate success met the harsh realities of a competitive job market. He tried his hand at various ventures, each one failing to take root, leaving them deeper in debt and despair. Aisha, ever the optimist, never faltered. She took on odd jobs, from tailoring to selling small crafts, her nimble fingers working tirelessly to put food on their table and keep a roof over their heads, even if that roof often leaked. Her laughter, even in their darkest hours, was a melody that reminded Hakim of the simple joys they still possessed, a beacon that kept his own hope from extinguishing entirely. Then came the eviction notice, a cruel official stamp on their dwindling fortunes. The landlord, tired of their repeated pleas for extensions, had finally lost patience. With nowhere to go, their few possessions bundled into worn sacks, they found themselves on the unforgiving streets, the cold concrete their new bed, the vast, indifferent sky their ceiling. Aisha, despite the biting wind and the gnawing hunger, held Hakim's hand tightly, her eyes reflecting not defeat, but a fierce determination. "We'll get through this, Hakim," she whispered, her voice hoarse but resolute. Together. Life on the streets was a brutal education, stripping away any remaining illusions of dignity or comfort. Each morning brought the same desperate scramble. Find enough money for a meager meal, secure a safe spot for the night, and avoid the dangers lurking in every shadowed alleyway. Hakim, once full of grand entrepreneurial visions, now found himself reduced to hawking cheap trinkets and bottled water in the relentless traffic, his voice raw from shouting over the din of car horns. The sun beat down mercilessly, the exhaust fumes choked him, and the indifference of passers-by was a constant stinging reminder of their plight. Aisha, ever resourceful, found ways to supplement their meager income. She would collect discarded plastic bottles and aluminum cans, meticulously sorting them for recycling, her hands often cut and bruised. She befriended other homeless women, sharing what little they had, offering kind words and a listening ear. Her spirit, though tested, remained remarkably intact, her compassion a shield against the dehumanizing aspects of their existence. She even managed to find a public library where they could occasionally seek refuge from the elements, devouring books, clinging to the hope that knowledge would somehow be their escape. Their nights were a cold, restless blur, spent huddled together under tattered blankets in hidden alcoves, seeking warmth and protection from the elements and the dangers of the night. Sleep was a luxury, constantly interrupted by the fear of theft or violence, or simply the biting cold. Yet, even in this abyss of despair, their love remained a fragile flame, flickering but refusing to die. They spoke of a future, a distant, shimmering mirage, where they would have a home, a business, and the security they so desperately craved. Aisha's unwavering belief in Hakim, even when he doubted himself, was the only thing that kept him from succumbing to utter hopelessness. One sweltering afternoon, as Hakim navigated the perilous dance between speeding vehicles, his tray of bottled water held high, a luxury sedan slowed to a crawl beside him. He mechanically extended his arm, mumbling his price, his eyes downcast, accustomed to the dismissive waves of affluent drivers. But this time a voice, vaguely familiar yet distant, called out his name. "Hakim, is that really you, Hakim?" He looked up, squinting against the glare, and his heart skipped a beat. Behind the tinted window, a man with a neatly trimmed beard and an expensive suit was staring at him, a look of profound shock and recognition on his face. It was Akin. Akin, a man of imposing stature with broad shoulders and a commanding presence, had a deep resonant voice and eyes that held both intelligence and a quiet kindness. His dark skin glowed, a testament to his success and well-being. Akin, his childhood friend, the brilliant but struggling student Hakim had once tutored, shared his last meal with, and even lent his last few naira to during their university days. Akin, who had disappeared after securing a scholarship for his master's in Canada, leaving Hakim with only a vague promise to reconnect someday. The years had etched lines of maturity on Akin's face, but the warmth in his eyes was unmistakable. A flood of memories washed over Hakim late-night study sessions, shared dreams, the camaraderie of youth. He fumbled with his tray, tears stinging his eyes, a mix of shame and overwhelming relief warring within him. Akin quickly pulled over, got out of the car, and embraced Hakim tightly, oblivious to the stares of other motorists. "My brother, what happened?" Akin's voice was laced with genuine concern, his hand firmly on Hakim's shoulder. In that moment, amidst the chaos of the traffic, a tiny flicker of hope ignited in Hakim's desolate heart, a hope he hadn't dared to entertain for what felt like an eternity. Akin insisted Hakim get into his car, the plush leather seats a stark contrast to the rough pavement Hakim had grown accustomed to. As they drove, Hakim, hesitant at first, poured out his story, the failed ventures, the mounting debts, the eviction, the crushing reality of homelessness, and Aisha's unwavering loyalty through it all. Akin listened intently, his expression a mix of sorrow and quiet determination. He didn't offer pity. Instead, his gaze held a deep understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the cruel hand fate had dealt his old friend. "Hakim, you helped me when I had nothing," Akin finally said, his voice firm. "You shared your last with me. You believed in me when no one else did. I wouldn't be where I am today without you." He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. "I'm working as a senior consultant for a major firm now, and we're involved in several government projects. There's a new infrastructure contract, a massive one, that's just been approved. It requires a lot of on-the-ground management, logistics, and a strong, trustworthy partner." Hakim listened, a knot forming in his stomach, daring to hope. Akin then outlined his proposal. He explained that his firm couldn't directly bid on certain aspects of the contract due to internal regulations, but they needed a reliable local partner. He saw Hakim's entrepreneurial spirit, his resilience, and his inherent trustworthiness as the perfect fit. "I'll guide you, Hakim," Akin promised. "I'll provide the initial capital, the technical know-how, and the connections. You just need to be ready to work harder than you ever have before. This isn't charity. It's an opportunity, a partnership. Are you in?" Hakim, his voice thick with emotion, could only nod, a profound sense of destiny washing over him. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Akin moved Hakim and Aisha into a modest but clean apartment, a place with real walls and a roof that didn't leak, a luxury they hadn't known in years. Aisha wept tears of joy, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, her gratitude for Akin boundless. Hakim, meanwhile, was immersed in a crash course on government contracts, supply chain management, and project execution. Akin spent hours with him, patiently explaining the intricacies, introducing him to key figures, and mentoring him with an unwavering commitment that spoke volumes of their shared past. The contract itself was daunting, a multi-million-dollar project to upgrade critical public infrastructure across several regions. It involved sourcing materials, managing labor, adhering to strict timelines, and navigating complex bureaucratic hurdles. Akin, true to his word, provided the initial seed money, enough to establish a small office, hire a skeletal staff, and secure the necessary permits. He also connected Hakim with reputable suppliers and introduced him to the government officials overseeing the project, vouching for Hakim's integrity and capabilities. Aisha, though initially overwhelmed, quickly adapted to their new circumstances. She took charge of managing their new home, ensuring Hakim had healthy meals and a peaceful environment to focus on his work. She also helped with the nascent business, organizing documents, answering calls, and providing moral support whenever Hakim felt overwhelmed. Her quiet efficiency and unwavering belief in Hakim were invaluable, reminding him of the strength she had always possessed, a strength that had seen them through their darkest days. This was not just Hakim's opportunity, it was theirs, a shared journey towards a brighter future. The initial weeks of the contract were a relentless grind. Hakim, fueled by the memory of their homelessness and Aisha's sacrifices, worked tirelessly, often burning the midnight oil, poring over blueprints and logistics reports. Akin, though busy with his own responsibilities, remained a constant presence, offering strategic advice, troubleshooting problems, and leveraging his influence to smooth over any unforeseen obstacles. Their partnership was seamless, built on a foundation of trust and a shared understanding of the stakes involved. Hakim learned quickly, absorbing every piece of advice, his innate business acumen reawakening with the opportunity. As the project progressed, the results began to show. The first phase, a critical road network upgrade, was completed ahead of schedule and under budget, earning commendation from government officials. Hakim's reputation as a reliable and efficient contractor began to spread, opening doors to further opportunities. The initial capital Akin provided had been judiciously invested, and the returns were starting to flow in, transforming their financial situation from precarious to comfortable, then rapidly to affluent. The small apartment was soon exchanged for a spacious house in a desirable neighborhood. Aisha watched Hakim's transformation with a mixture of pride and quiet apprehension. He was still the same Hakim, yet there was a subtle shift, a newfound confidence that bordered on arrogance. He started spending more time at exclusive clubs, networking with the big boys as he called them, the influential figures who now sought his company. She tried to keep him grounded, reminding him of their journey, of the values they had cherished when they had nothing. But the world Hakim was now entering was dazzling, and its allure was proving to be a powerful, intoxicating force. Hakim's success was no longer a quiet ripple, it was a roaring wave. The government contract, flawlessly executed, led to more lucrative deals, each one expanding his empire. His company, once a fledgling operation, now boasted a sprawling office, a fleet of luxury vehicles, and a growing team of highly skilled professionals. He was no longer just a contractor. He was a titan of industry, his name whispered with respect in boardrooms and political circles. The man who once hawked water in traffic now commanded attention, his presence filling any room he entered. His wardrobe transformed from simple, practical attire to bespoke suits and designer watches. His taste in food shifted from Aisha's home-cooked meals to gourmet dining at exclusive restaurants, where he entertained powerful clients and influential friends. He acquired a taste for fine wines, expensive cigars, and exotic vacations, each new indulgence a symbol of his meteoric rise. The humble, grateful Hakim of old was slowly being eclipsed by a polished, confident, and increasingly detached version of himself, one who seemed to forget the struggles that had shaped him. Aisha, still living in the shadow of his rapidly expanding world, found herself increasingly isolated. She tried to engage him in conversations about their shared past, about the simple dreams they once held, but his responses became increasingly terse, his attention fleeting. He would often return home late, his mind still buzzing with business deals and social engagements, leaving her feeling like an afterthought. The warmth that had once defined their connection began to cool, replaced by a growing chasm of unspoken words and unmet expectations. As Hakim's wealth grew, so did his circle of friends. These were not the loyal companions forged in hardship, but fair-weather acquaintances drawn to his newfound power and influence. They flattered him, celebrated his every success, and introduced him to a world of opulence that Aisha, with her simple tastes and quiet demeanor, found increasingly alien. He began to see her through their eyes, a woman who didn't quite fit into his glamorous new life, a relic of a past he was desperately trying to outrun. He started making subtle criticisms disguised as suggestions. Aisha, perhaps you should consider a new wardrobe, something more modern. Or, darling, these social events are important. You need to learn to mingle, to hold your own in these circles. Aisha, hurt but understanding, tried to adapt, but she felt like a bird trying to fly in a gilded cage. She missed the simple evenings they once shared, the laughter over a shared plate of food, the comfort of their easy silences. The chasm between them widened with each passing day. Hakim spent less and less time at home, his excuses becoming more elaborate, his presence more fleeting. When he was home, he was often preoccupied, his phone constantly buzzing with calls and messages, his mind miles away. Aisha tried to bridge the gap, to remind him of their bond, but it felt like she was speaking to a ghost, a shadow of the man she had loved and suffered with. The man who had once held her hand on the cold streets now barely met her gaze. Hakim's new lifestyle was a dizzying array of private jets, exclusive resorts, and high-stakes business deals. He reveled in the attention, the power, and the endless possibilities that his wealth afforded him. He frequented art auctions, acquired a collection of vintage cars, and even bought a sprawling yacht. Each acquisition a testament to his unchecked ambition and growing materialism. The simple joys of life, once found in Aisha's smile or a shared meal, were now replaced by the thrill of acquisition and the pursuit of ever greater luxury. His conversations, once centered on their shared dreams and future, now revolved around market trends, investment portfolios, and the latest gossip from the elite social circles he inhabited. He spoke of class and image, subtly implying that Aisha, with her humble background and unassuming nature, lacked the sophistication required for his new world. He started bringing home friends, glamorous women, and suave businessmen who would subtly reinforce his evolving perception of what a successful man's partner should be. Aisha, observing this transformation, felt a profound sense of loss. The man she had loved was slipping away, replaced by a stranger consumed by greed and superficiality. She tried to remind him of their values, of the importance of humility and gratitude, but her words seemed to bounce off a newly erected wall of indifference. The shared history, the sacrifices, the very foundation of their relationship seemed to hold no weight against the glittering allure of his new reality. The silences between Hakim and Aisha grew longer, heavier. Their conversations became transactional, devoid of the warmth and intimacy that once defined their bond. Hakim would issue instructions, make plans without consulting her, and treat her more like a house manager than a beloved wife. Aisha, in turn, retreated into herself, her once vibrant spirit dimming under the weight of his neglect. The spacious house, once a symbol of their triumph, now felt like a lonely prison. He began to openly express his dissatisfaction, albeit in a veiled manner. "Aisha, you really should consider getting a personal stylist. My associates' wives are always impeccably dressed. Or perhaps you should take up a hobby, something that elevates your profile. Philanthropy, maybe." Each suggestion was a thinly veiled critique, a reminder that she was not enough, that she didn't measure up to his new standards. Aisha would nod, her heart aching, knowing that no amount of external change could bridge the growing emotional distance between them. Akin, who occasionally visited, noticed the tension. He tried to subtly intervene, reminding Hakim of Aisha's unwavering support during their darkest days. "Remember where you came from, Hakim," he'd say, "and who was there with you." Hakim would dismiss his concerns with a wave of his hand, attributing it to marital issues or Aisha's inability to adapt. Akin, though troubled, could only watch as his friend, once so grounded, became increasingly consumed by the intoxicating allure of wealth and status. Hakim's public appearances were always meticulously curated. He was seen with influential figures, surrounded by beautiful, fashionable women, and always presented as the epitome of success. Aisha, meanwhile, was increasingly left behind, her presence deemed an inconvenience or worse, an embarrassment. He would find excuses for her absence at high-profile events, claiming she was not feeling well or preferred a quiet evening at home, even when she longed to be by his side. The once cherished memories of their struggles became a source of irritation for Hakim. He would flinch when Aisha reminisced about their time on the streets or the humble meals they once shared. "Please, Aisha," he'd snap, "let's not dwell on the past. We've moved beyond that." He was trying to erase that chapter of his life, and Aisha, who embodied that past, became an inconvenient reminder of a reality he no longer wanted to acknowledge. Aisha, sensing his growing disdain, tried to make herself invisible to avoid anything that might provoke his displeasure. She spent her days tending to the house, reading, or visiting old friends who still remembered the humble, loving Hakim. She clung to the hope that this phase was temporary, that the man she loved would eventually remember the true meaning of their bond, that the glitter of his new world would eventually fade, revealing the enduring value of their shared history. The breaking point arrived subtly at first, then with a crushing finality. Hakim began suggesting that Aisha move out, initially under the guise of giving her space or allowing her to find herself. He spoke of separate residences, of a more modern arrangement that would allow them both to grow independently. Aisha listened, her heart sinking, understanding the true meaning behind his carefully chosen words. He wanted her gone. He then escalated his demands, making it clear that her presence was no longer desired. "Aisha, this isn't working," he declared one evening, his voice devoid of emotion. "You don't fit into my world anymore. We've grown apart. It's time for you to leave." He offered her a generous financial settlement, a cold, calculated transaction that reduced their years of shared struggle and love to a monetary value. Aisha, stunned and heartbroken, tried one last time to appeal to the man she had loved. She reminded him of their vows, of the sacrifices, of the unwavering support she had given him when he had nothing. She spoke of their shared dreams, of the home they had built together, brick by painful brick. But Hakim's eyes were cold, his resolve unyielding. The man who had once needed her desperately now saw her as nothing more than an obstacle to his continued ascent. The day Aisha left was a blur of tears and silent goodbyes. Hakim was conspicuously absent, claiming an urgent business meeting, a final act of cowardice that spared him the pain of witnessing her departure. She packed a single suitcase, leaving behind the opulent life she had never truly desired, taking only the memories of a love that had once been pure and unwavering. The vast, empty house echoed with the silence of a broken promise. She found temporary refuge with an old friend, her spirit shattered but not entirely broken. The contrast between her current reality and the life she had just left was stark, a cruel reminder of how quickly fortunes and affections could change. She spent her days in a daze, replaying the events, searching for answers, trying to comprehend how the man she had loved so fiercely could have become so utterly heartless. Hakim, meanwhile, felt a strange sense of liberation. The burden of his past, as he now perceived Aisha, had been lifted. He threw himself into his work and his new social life with renewed vigor, embracing the freedom to pursue his desires without constraint. He rarely thought of Aisha, and when he did, it was with a detached sense of justification, convincing himself that he had done what was necessary for his own happiness and continued success. Aisha struggled to rebuild her life. The financial settlement, though substantial, felt like blood money, a cold exchange for years of devotion. She found a small apartment, far from the glittering world Hakim now inhabited, and tried to find solace in solitude. But the memories haunted her, the echoes of Hakim's laughter, the warmth of his touch, the promises he had made under the stars when they had nothing but each other. She tried to find work to regain a sense of purpose, but her heart wasn't in it. The betrayal had left a gaping wound, a profound sense of disillusionment that permeated every aspect of her existence. She often wondered if she had been foolish to believe in love, to sacrifice so much for a man who ultimately saw her as expendable. The vibrant, optimistic Aisha was replaced by a quiet, melancholic shadow of her former self. Meanwhile, Hakim's star continued to rise. He was featured in business magazines, lauded as a self-made success story, a testament to hard work and shrewd business acumen. He gave interviews, projecting an image of a benevolent leader, a man who had overcome adversity to achieve greatness. The narrative carefully omitted any mention of Aisha or the humble beginnings that had shaped him. His public persona was a carefully constructed facade, hiding the moral decay beneath. Hakim's arrogance grew unchecked. He became dismissive of those he perceived as beneath him, quick to anger, and increasingly isolated from genuine connection. His friends were sycophants drawn to his wealth, offering little in the way of true companionship or honest counsel. Akin, his loyal friend and partner, found himself increasingly at odds with Hakim's self-serving decisions and his blatant disregard for ethical considerations. Akin tried once more to reason with Hakim, to remind him of the values they once shared, of the importance of integrity and gratitude. He expressed his concern about Hakim's treatment of Aisha, warning him that such callousness would eventually catch up with him. Hakim merely scoffed, dismissing Akin's concerns as old-fashioned and sentimental. He believed his success was solely a result of his own brilliance, forgetting the hand that had lifted him from the streets. The more Hakim pushed Aisha out of his life, the more he seemed to push away anyone who reminded him of his past. He stopped taking Akin's calls as frequently, grew impatient with his advice, and began to make unilateral decisions that sometimes bordered on reckless. He was convinced he was invincible, that his wealth and influence would protect him from any consequences. The man who had once valued loyalty above all else now valued only power and personal gratification. Aisha, though heartbroken, slowly began to pick up the pieces of her life. She found solace in volunteering at a local charity, helping others who were struggling, a poignant echo of her own past. She rediscovered her passion for tailoring, creating beautiful garments that brought a small income and a sense of accomplishment. The pain of Hakim's betrayal remained, a dull ache in her heart, but she refused to let it define her entirely. She often saw glimpses of Hakim in the news, his face plastered across magazine covers, his name synonymous with success. Each sighting was a fresh stab of pain, a reminder of what she had lost, not just a husband, but a shared future, a dream they had built together. She wondered if he ever thought of her, if he ever felt a pang of regret for the way he had discarded her like an old, unwanted possession. Despite her efforts to move on, a deep sadness lingered. The vibrant, hopeful young woman who had once shared her last meal with a struggling student was now a quiet, reserved individual, her eyes holding a wisdom born of profound suffering. She had learned the hard way that wealth could corrupt, that success could blind, and that the promise of forever could be shattered by the allure of a fleeting, materialistic world. While Hakim basked in his glory, Akin continued to work diligently behind the scenes, managing the intricate details of the government contracts and ensuring their flawless execution. He was the true architect of Hakim's success, his strategic mind and vast network, the invisible engine driving the empire forward. Hakim, blinded by his own ego, often took credit for Akin's brilliant maneuvers, believing his own instincts were solely responsible for their triumphs. Akin, though increasingly disillusioned by Hakim's arrogance and his treatment of Aisha, remained committed to the projects. His loyalty was not to Hakim's ego, but to the integrity of the work, to the promises made to the government, and to the people who would benefit from the infrastructure upgrades. He also held a deeper, unrevealed motive, a long-term plan that he meticulously nurtured, waiting for the opportune moment to unfold. He observed Hakim's increasingly reckless decisions, his growing detachment from the day-to-day operations, and his blatant disregard for the rules. Akin documented everything, quietly building a case, a meticulous record of Hakim's transgressions and his escalating hubris. He knew that unchecked power often led to a spectacular downfall, and he was preparing the stage for just such an event, a quiet storm brewing beneath the surface of Hakim's glittering success. Hakim, now at the pinnacle of his power, embarked on his most ambitious project yet, a massive multi-billion-dollar development that would redefine the city's skyline. He cut corners, bypassed regulations, and alienated key stakeholders, convinced that his influence would smooth over any issues. He became increasingly isolated, trusting no one, his paranoia growing with his wealth. The whispers of his unethical practices began to circulate, faint at first, then growing louder. Akin, seeing Hakim's self-destructive path, knew the time was drawing near. He had completed his part of the grand design, ensuring the government projects were secure and that Hakim's company was inextricably linked to them, yet vulnerable to its leader's missteps. He made subtle moves, planting seeds of doubt, ensuring that the right information reached the right ears, all while maintaining his facade of unwavering loyalty to Hakim. The media, once fawning, began to publish investigative pieces, subtly questioning Hakim's rapid rise and his opaque business dealings. The government, initially impressed by his efficiency, started to scrutinize his contracts more closely. The storm was gathering, and Hakim, too consumed by his own grandeur, remained blissfully unaware of the tempest brewing on the horizon, orchestrated by the very man he had once helped and then forgotten. The day of reckoning arrived with a sudden, brutal force. A major government audit was announced, targeting Hakim's company, specifically the multi-billion-dollar development project. The news sent shockwaves through the industry, and Hakim, for the first time in years, felt a tremor of fear. He tried to use his influence to pull strings, but the doors that had once opened so easily now remained firmly shut. As the audit intensified, damning evidence began to surface. Fraudulent invoices, illegal land acquisitions, and a complex web of shell companies designed to siphon funds. The public outcry was immediate and fierce. Hakim's empire, built on a foundation of hubris and betrayal, began to crumble. He was stripped of his contracts, his assets frozen, and his name dragged through the mud, a pariah in the very circles that had once celebrated him. Then came the final devastating blow. At a press conference where Hakim was publicly disgraced, Akin stood beside the government prosecutor, a calm, resolute figure. He revealed that he had been working undercover for years, gathering evidence, meticulously documenting Hakim's every transgression. "Hakim," Akin stated, his voice clear and unwavering, "you taught me the importance of integrity and loyalty when we had nothing. It seems you forgot those lessons when you had everything. I had to remind you." The revelation sent shockwaves through the nation. Akin, the quiet, unassuming partner, was hailed as a hero, a man who had sacrificed his own comfort to expose corruption. He explained that his initial offer of help to Hakim was genuine, a repayment of a debt. But as Hakim's character deteriorated, Akin realized he couldn't stand by and watch his friend abuse his power and betray the very principles they once held dear. He had chosen justice over blind loyalty. As Hakim faced the full force of the law, stripped of his wealth, assets and reputation, accounts were frozen. He was left with nothing but the bitter taste of his own arrogance. He remembered Aisha, the woman he had discarded, the woman who had stood by him when he had nothing. He remembered Akin, the friend he had helped, then forgotten, who had now orchestrated his downfall. The irony was a cruel, poetic justice. Years later, Hakim, now a broken man released from prison, found himself back on the streets, hawking bottled water, a ghost of his former self. One sweltering afternoon, a luxury sedan pulled up beside him. The window rolled down, revealing a familiar, compassionate face. It was Aisha, impeccably dressed, her eyes holding a quiet strength. She had used the financial settlement Hakim had given her, combined with her innate business acumen and the connections she had quietly cultivated through her charity work, to build a thriving social enterprise. She now ran a successful chain of community centers and sustainable businesses, employing hundreds, including many who had once been homeless. She looked at Hakim not with anger, but with profound sadness. "Hakim," she said, her voice soft but firm, "some lessons are learned the hard way. But even now, there's always a chance for redemption if you're willing to truly earn it." She didn't offer him money, but a job at one of her centers, a chance to rebuild his life, not through grand schemes, but through honest work and genuine contribution, a path he had long abandoned. The man who had once cast her aside now stood before her humbled and in need of the very compassion he had so carelessly discarded. What a tale! And that brings us to the end of another incredible journey. Wasn't that a tale to remember? Until next time. We hope you felt the rhythm, the warmth, and the spirit of Africa in every word. We're already counting down the moments until our next adventure together. And just before I sign off, make sure to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this journey with everyone. Together, we'll keep the heart of Africa beating through every single story. Thank you for watching and see you soon in our next video.